Hey, Michael with XForcePC. I want to talk a little bit more about CPU frequency. And specifically, I'm going to use the 9900K as an example. I did a video on this before where I talked about it, and I'll link to that video because it has some additional data in it that you might be interested in. So look for that in the notes for this video. So on our website, you may see different wording for the 9900K. For instance, we may say the i9 9900K at up to 5 gigahertz versus saying the i9 9900K at 4.9 gigahertz. So what's the meaning in that wording and what's the significance behind it? Well, technically, this is faster, even though this is a lower number, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So this is Intel's wording, the 9900K at up to 5 gigahertz, and that's depending on the Intel Turbo Boost technology to reach that 5 gigahertz. Whereas here, we're overclocking to 4.9, and we're saying no matter how many cores you load, and no matter how many threads you load, you're going to get your 4.9. Now, the i9 9900K has a base frequency of 3.6, meaning when it's not turboing up at all, it'll run at 3.6. And then with Intel's Turbo Boost, it can go as high as 5.0. And that's where this 5.0 comes from. Now, the ability to reach that 5.0 depends on the number of threads being loaded on the, in other words, how much work is being asked of the processor, by how many threads, and how much power you can deliver to it, and the cooling. All kinds of different factors can affect that. I'm gonna turn my little fancy dry erase board around, and let's talk about a little bit more. Now, this is an experiment I did using Prime 95. And so this is the i9 9900K depending on Turbo Boost for its speed. And so in other words, this is not overclocked. This is just you put the chip in and you tell the computer to go. Now, when I use just one thread on this chip using Prime 95, I got between 4.9 and 5.0 gigahertz. Very close to what Intel says is the max turbo frequency of 5.0 gigahertz. That's pretty good. But you notice when I load the processor up with 4 threads worth of work, that my frequency then drops down to between 4.7 and 4.8. When I load it with 8 threads worth of work, it goes down to 4.6. And lastly, when I load all 16 threads, it's 8 cores with hyperthreading, so 16 threads, my frequency is somewhere around 4.3 to 4.5. And that's how Intel's Turbo Boost works. The less cores you load with work, the higher your frequency. And in most gaming, you're not using more than 4 cores. So you're going to be in this type of range. And X-Plane, and in fact, when I run it on this chip, runs around 4.73 gigahertz. So it falls into this range right here. Now, when we say that you're overclocked to 4.9, look what that does to the numbers. Here, what do we get? 4.9. Here, what do we get? 4.9. Here, 4.9. And all 16 threads loaded, 4.9 across the board. So that's what the overclocking does for you versus using and depending on the turbo speed. Now, when you're loading all 16 cores and you're running them all at 4.9, you produce a good amount of heat. There's a lot of voltage that goes to the chip, and so your cooling solution has to be very good, and that's why the 9900K at 4.9 we typically run on water cooler. So hopefully that helps you understand the difference between when we say the i9 9900K at up to 5 gigahertz versus the i9 9900K at 4.9 gigahertz. If you have any questions, send an email to xforcesales@gmail.com. Again, that's xforcesales@gmail.com. And look for the link to that other video in the description.